This word comes to my mind often throughout the day, not as a fantasy, not as nostalgia, but as something I've slowly, carefully rebuilt a relationship with over the course of my adult life. When I was a child, I was fascinated by the concept of magic that I'd always hear about in fairy tales, the kind with wands and spells and impossible transformations, the kind that operated outside the rules of the world. That fascination felt completely natural then. Children understand instinctively that existence is astonishing. They haven't yet been taught to take it for granted. But then you grow up, and at some point, with the best intentions, someone explains reality to you. Science, facts, cause and effect, logic, the mechanisms behind the curtain. And the conclusion you draw, the conclusion I drew, was that magic like this doesn't truly exist in reality, that it was a beautiful story we tell children before they're old enough for the truth. It was sad to tell myself that one day, sadder than I realized at the time. Because what I didn't understand then was that I wasn't getting closer to reality by dismissing wonder. I was just getting further from it. Many years later, I revisited the thought, and this time something different happened. I thought to myself, it's strange how I convinced myself that magic doesn't exist, because when I really think about it, magic does exist in many other ways, abstract ways, quieter ways, the kind that doesn't announce itself with a flash of light, but that rewards you for paying attention. The blooming of a flower. Think about that for a moment. Actually, think about it. A seed, smaller than a fingernail, contains within it the complete instructions for an organism that will push through soil, grow toward a specific kind of light, produce color, attract specific creatures, reproduce. Nobody designed that flower. It designed itself, across millions of pressure and response and adaptation. And it does this in your garden without any acknowledgement whatsoever. That is not ordinary. That is extraordinary, dressed in ordinary clothing. Life itself is magical. My consciousness, my mind, the fact that matter arranged itself in such a way that it can now observe itself, wonder about itself, feel joy and loss and curiosity about its own existence. There is no satisfying scientific explanation for why there is something rather than nothing, for why the universe fine-tuned itself to the precise constants required for complexity to emerge, for why any of this is happening at all. These simple things around us, in their very existence, are something phenomenal and inexplicable. This is the reason why I actually do believe in magic today. My personal definition of magic has only evolved. It's everything phenomenal that we can't explain, that we don't have an answer to and may never find. It's not supernatural. It's more natural than anything. It's all over nature, all over reality itself. I feel it when I see trees become green during the spring, that annual impossible return of life from bare branches. I feel it when I watch rain fall, when I visit the ocean and hear the sound of the water meeting the shore, when I breathe and realize without thinking about it that my body has been doing this my entire life perfectly without instruction. To be alive in this universe, to be experiencing it, that is incredible every single day. Magic is everywhere after all, and I'm happy that I was able to find it again. Magic is what you perceive it to be, and that perception, that choice to look at existence as something astonishing rather than something routine, makes life so much more exhilarating. So I want to ask you, when did you last stop long enough to actually notice something you usually walk past? Something so familiar it became invisible? What would it look like if you looked at it, really looked, for the first time again? The more I sit with this idea of magic, the more I realize how far it extends. It's easy to feel it in nature, the ocean, the spring trees, the rain. Those things are large and obvious and ancient, and they do the work of astonishing you without much effort on your part. You show up, You pay attention and they deliver. But I've been thinking about the subtler forms, the ones hiding inside ordinary human experience that is somehow even more improbable than a blooming flower. Take creativity. The fact that a thought can exist in one mind and then, through nothing more than arranged marks on a surface or vibrations in the air, transfer itself into another mind and arrive there intact, sometimes more vivid than it left, is genuinely extraordinary. That's what language is. That's what music is. That's what this is right now. Something that existed only inside one person's interior life, finding its way into yours. I don't have a better word for that than magic. And then there's human connection, the specific miracle of two people finding each other in a world of billions and recognizing something. I'm not even sure what exactly, some frequency, some quality of attention, and deciding to stay in each other's orbit. The fact that a conversation can leave you feeling more like yourself than you did before it started, that someone else's presence can physically regulate your nervous system, can change the chemistry of your brain, can make a hard thing bearable by the simple fact of their being there. That's not ordinary. We've just agreed to treat it as ordinary because it happens so often. And then there's the magic I've been most aware of lately. The magic of becoming something new at a point in your life when you thought the shape of things was largely settled. I am building something right now that didn't exist a year ago. A creative practice, a body of work, a version of my days that looks genuinely different from what came before. And what strikes me about this, what feels almost impossible when I actually examine it, is that the raw material for all of it was already here. The ideas, the perspective, the voice, the hunger to make something meaningful, none of that arrived recently. It was always there. What changed was simply the decision to use it. That decision, small, private, made without fanfare, is producing something real, something that compounds, something that a future version of me will look back on as a turning point, even though from the inside it felt like just another Tuesday. There is magic in that, in the fact that a single quiet decision can redirect the entire arc of a life, that the distance between the life you're living and the life you want to be living is sometimes nothing more than a choice you haven't made yet. And then the creativity itself, the experience of making something, of starting with nothing and ending with something that didn't exist before. I don't think I'll ever fully get used to that. The moment when an idea that was formless and interior suddenly has shape and weight and exists outside of you. It's a small creation, but creation is creation. The universe did the same thing, just at a different scale. We are, all of us, made of the same stuff as stars, arranged by the same forces, participating in the same improbable, ongoing experiment. And somewhere inside that experiment, we get to make things. We get to think thoughts and share them and connect and build and become. If that isn't magic, I don't know what is. So I want to ask you, when you look at your own life with honest eyes, where is the magic that you've been treating as ordinary? What have you stopped seeing because you've seen it too many times?
Sometimes I love to reflect on all the things that fill me with a deep, warm glow inside. Not the big things, not the achievements or milestones or the moments that make a good story later. The quiet things, the ones that work immediately, without explanation, without needing to be justified. For me, one of those things has always been animals. That spark of joy, the very thing that makes my heart melt. There's something that happens when I direct my thoughts toward warm, fuzzy creatures, puppies and kittens especially, though it doesn't stop there, that I can only describe as an unclenching, like something that had been holding tension without my noticing suddenly lets go. The mental noise settles, the to-do list recedes, and for a moment the world is just a golden retriever puppy trying to figure out stairs, or a kitten discovering its own tail for the first time, and that is genuinely sufficient. I don't think that's trivial. I think that's important. When I think of animals, cats and dogs in particular, I think, what a sweet, innocent preacher. There's a purity to them that the human world doesn't often offer. They're not performing. They're not managing your perception of them. They're not working an angle. A dog is simply, completely, entirely itself at every moment. There's a philosophical argument to be made that animals are more honestly present than most humans manage to be on their best days. They're my little muses, my little familiars. That word familiar feels exactly right. Something about their energy is recognizable in the deepest way, as if the bond between humans and certain animals runs beneath language and reason, all the way down to something ancient and cellular. Now, I'll be honest about something. I wish I could own a pet myself, but unfortunately I'm always on the go, so it would be sad if I had to leave a furry little friend neglected at home all the time. That's a real sacrifice I've made, and I don't pretend it doesn't cost me something. The specific warmth of an animal in the same room as you, that physical, present, breathing companionship, is not something that can be fully substituted. But that's not to say that I can't enjoy the idea of cats and dogs from afar, and I do, genuinely. It's always wonderful to pull up some cute shorts on puppies and kittens just being their cute little selves. There's something about watching a creature exist in pure, unself-conscious delight that is genuinely restorative. No irony, no subtext, just a small being encountering the world with everything it has. Or even to watch channels of animals in the wild, just doing their thing. That's its own kind of medicine. The elephant family moving across a plain, the whale breaching for reasons nobody fully understands, the wolf pack navigating territory with a social intelligence that predates our own by millennia. It's strange how rewarding that is, but what's even more fascinating is how absolutely magical the animal kingdom is. To be in the presence of a cat, even just to think about it, and wonder what kind of consciousness is behind that cute little face. What does a cat actually experience? What is the interior texture of a life lived entirely in the present moment, guided by sensation and instinct, and something that looks remarkably like preference and even mood? We genuinely don't know, and I find that mystery more compelling than unsettling. Or what kind of exciting universe a dog experiences. The olfactory world alone, capable of detecting things humans can't begin to perceive, means a dog walking down an ordinary street is moving through an environment of almost incomprehensible richness. Other minds, other ways of being alive, all of it happening alongside us, quietly extraordinary, every single day. So, I want to ask you, is there an animal, wild or domestic, that has always done something to you that you can't quite explain? Something that calms you, or opens you, or makes you feel, just for a moment, like the world is a warmer place than you'd remembered?
What is it like to be you? I look at a cat sitting in a window, completely still, eyes tracking something outside that I can't see, and I think, what is happening in there? Not just the neurological mechanics of it, not just the stimulus and response, but the actual interior experience. Is there a felt quality to what that cat is perceiving? Is there something it is like to be that cat in that window, watching that thing? The philosopher Thomas Nagel asked a version of this question about bats in 1974. He argued that even if we knew everything there was to know about bat neurology and echolocation and behavior, we still wouldn't know what it's like to experience the world as a bat. that there is a subjective interior to experience that objective science cannot fully reach. He called it the hard problem of consciousness. And the hard problem applies everywhere, not just to bats, not just to exotic animals. It applies to the dog sleeping at the foot of someone's bed, to the crow that remembers the face of someone who was unkind to it 3 years ago, to the elephant that returns to the bones of its dead and stands with them in something that looks, from every behavioral angle, like grief. What I find most astonishing is how consistently we have underestimated animal minds throughout history. For centuries, the dominant scientific view was that animals were essentially biological machines, responding to stimuli, driven by instinct but not truly experiencing anything. Consciousness was considered a uniquely human possession. That view has been quietly dismantled. We now know that elephants recognize themselves in mirrors, one of the markers we once used to define self-awareness. That dolphins have names for each other, signature whistles that function like personal identifiers in a social world far more complex than we imagined. That crows not only use tools but manufacture them, selecting and modifying materials for specific purposes in ways that require planning and foresight. That octopuses with nervous systems distributed across their arms may experience something closer to 8 simultaneous streams of sensation than the single unified experience we assume consciousness to be. Each of these discoveries required us to revise something we thought we knew, and each revision pointed in the same direction, toward a world far more full of inner life than we had assumed. I think about this when I watch a cat staring at something I can't see. It isn't just cute. It's a reminder that I am sharing this planet with creatures whose experience of reality may be as rich and textured and genuinely felt as my own, just organized around completely different axes, different senses, different timescales, different needs and fears and pleasures. And there's something humbling about that. Something that rearranges the furniture of your own importance slightly. We tend to treat human consciousness as the gold standard, the thing all other consciousness is measured against and found lesser. But what if a dog's experience of smell is as vivid and complex and meaning-laden as our experience of music? What if a cat's relationship with the present moment is a form of awareness we've been trying to cultivate in meditation for thousands of years? What if the creatures we keep for comfort are quietly teaching us something about how to be? Other minds, other ways of being alive, all of it happening in rooms and forests and oceans alongside us, completely itself, asking nothing from us except occasionally a little food and the warmth of being near. I'd like to ask you, when you look into an animal's eyes and feel something you can't name, what do you think you're actually recognizing? What is it in them that speaks to something in you before language has a chance to intervene? Imagine this. It's the future. You take a pill. The pill contains molecules that are so engineered and sophisticated that, like a virus, they can hack into your very DNA. The molecules can be controlled by an app or a programmer. Someone wants to continue growing taller. They can. It would take years, but the molecules that can change biology would be a treatment someone takes on an ongoing basis, reshaping themselves slowly from the inside out. And since it has such a deep connection to biology, it could also change longevity. Not forever, but for a very long time. It can restrict the aging process, dial it back, buy decades that weren't in the original arrangement. I love this idea. I genuinely love it. It's all, of course, a fantasy, a pseudoscience from a sci-fi movie that I may expand one day if I ever dabble into script writing for films. The scientist in this story hasn't been born yet. The technology is probably 1,000 years away if it arrives at all. But the concept itself has a specific spark of inspiration to me that I keep returning to, because it raises a question that isn't science fiction at all. I tell myself,
I may not be blessed enough to live in a time where such an advanced technology exists, but it's an idea for the future that has a place in my mind that keeps me feeling hopeful for the scope of my own lifetime. And it makes me think, what is it that I can do today for myself to better my own future while I still can? That question, that's the real pill. For decades, I spent a lot of my time just coasting, doing nothing, being lost. Not dramatically lost, not in a way that would make a compelling movie, just quietly adrift, moving through days without much intention behind them, filling time rather than using it, waiting for some unspecified moment when things would click into place and the real version of my life would begin. It didn't click. Nothing clicked, because nothing was being built. Until I came to this realization that time is limited and all that time I'm spending doing nothing, I can actually be building something. That's the sentence that changed things for me. Not a motivational quote, not a system or a framework, just the plain, slightly uncomfortable truth that the days are going either way, and the question is only what I do inside them. And even if I don't achieve the goal, it's the journey that I'm winning from. That's the part I didn't expect, that the process itself would be the reward, that showing up and building something, regardless of where it ends up, would make the days feel genuinely worth living in a way that coasting never did. The pill doesn't exist yet. Maybe it never will. But the decision to stop waiting for it, that one I can take today. Let me ask you, what have you been waiting for permission to begin? And what if the permission was always yours to give?
I want to tell you what building actually looks like from the inside, because I think there's a version of it that gets talked about that isn't quite honest. The highlight reel version. The one where someone woke up one day with clarity and direction and just started executing steadily and confidently toward a vision that was always sharp and always certain. That's not what it looks like for me. What it actually looks like is a Sunday morning with nowhere to be, sitting with something I'm working on, not entirely sure where it's going, trying things that don't work, and then trying something slightly different. It looks like a thought that arrives mid-walk and gets written down immediately because I've learned that if I don't catch it, then it's gone. It looks like 12 attempts at something before the 13th one feels right, and even then I'm not completely sure it's right, I just know it's better than the 12 before it. That's the texture of it. Ordinary and slightly uncertain and occasionally genuinely exciting. What I'm building right now is a creative practice that didn't exist a year ago. A YouTube channel that is slowly finding its shape, a writing habit that has become the backbone of everything else I'm doing, an understanding of AI tools that I'm developing not by reading about them, but by sitting with them and making things and failing at things and making slightly better things. None of it is finished. None of it is polished. All of it is real. And here's what I didn't anticipate when I started. I thought the reward would come at the end, when the channel had an audience, when the project was complete, when I could point at something finished and say, that's what I built, that's what all of it was for. But the reward arrived immediately, on day one, in the act of beginning. There's a quality of aliveness that comes from working on something that genuinely matters to you, something that didn't exist before you decided to make it exist, that I hadn't felt in years, maybe longer. It's not happiness exactly, it's more like rightness, like the sensation of moving in a direction that is actually yours rather than one you inherited or defaulted into. I feel so fulfilled building on my thoughts, expanding them, acting on things that I've told myself to do for years. That's the part that surprised me most, how much of what I'm doing now are things I had already told myself I wanted to do. The creative work, the writing, the exploration of technology as an artistic tool. These weren't new ideas, they were old ideas I finally stopped talking myself out of. And even if I don't achieve the goal, it's the journey that I'm winning from. I keep coming back to that because I keep finding it to be true in new ways. Every day I show up and work on something, that day belongs to me in a way that days spent waiting never did. The outcome is uncertain. The aliveness of the process is not. There's also something that compounds in a way I'm only beginning to understand. The things I'm making are connected to each other in ways I didn't plan. A thought from a journal entry becomes a script becomes a visual idea leads to a new way of using a tool, one thing feeds the next feeds something I couldn't have predicted from the starting point. That's what building actually looks like. Not a straight line toward a destination, more like a garden. You plant things, you tend them, and you discover what grows. Some of it surprises you completely. And that surprise, that ongoing encounter with what you're capable of that you genuinely didn't know about before you started, that might be the best part of all of it. So I want to ask you, if you started building something tomorrow, not the finished version, just the first imperfect day of it, what would you actually be making?
Sometimes, when I don't feel like doing anything, I find that the best thing to do is just nothing. Not productive nothing, not strategic rest, not a scheduled recovery period penciled into a calendar between tasks, just actual nothing. Closing my eyes and letting my thoughts float. And something happens when I do that. Visions come to my mind, kind of like bubbles from deep within my subconscious. Not forced, not summoned, they just rise, the way things do when the pressure is off and the surface goes still, and whatever was waiting beneath is finally allowed to come up. I need time sometimes to just restore myself, reset, relax. That's not a weakness or an indulgence. It took me a long time to stop treating it like one. Because I'm someone who likes to aim high, that's genuine. That ambition is real and I don't want to dim it. But I realized that I can't aim that high all the time or on an empty fuel tank. You can want everything and still have nothing left to pursue it with. And that nothingness itself, the deliberate, unhurried, unprogrammed kind, actually helps to fill that tank all the way to the brim. It can take many forms. Naps, sitting and just letting my thoughts roam, a window, a quiet room. It doesn't even have to be meditation or deep breaths. It's just all about relaxing and letting my creative thoughts come to me organically, not chasing the thoughts, letting them find me instead. There's a crucial difference between those two things that took me embarrassingly long to understand. Chasing thoughts burns energy. It produces a particular kind of mental noise, the sensation of running after something that keeps moving just ahead of you, always almost caught, never quite. It feels like effort and often produces very little. But sitting in stillness and letting thoughts arrive, that's a completely different experience. The thoughts that come in quiet are different in quality from the ones you hunt down. They're deeper, more connected. They arrive with a kind of completeness to them, as if they've been working on themselves somewhere below the surface and are only now ready to be found. I spent years trying to stay productive through caffeine, cup after cup, trying to maintain a pace my body wasn't built to sustain indefinitely. And what I found was predictable in retrospect: burnt out, exhausted, diminished sleep from all the caffeine. The productivity I was chasing sliding further away the harder I ran after it. It's when I pull back the caffeine, make sure I get as much rest as my body demands, that's when true sustainability comes out. I can feel the flow of productivity as a marathon, not a race that I eventually run out of breath trying to run. That reframe, marathon, not sprint, changed everything about how I plan my days and how I treat the quiet spaces between effort. A rested mind can go so much further, endure so much more, feel strengthened when it's given room to just breathe. I know this now not as a theory but as something I've actually felt. The difference between a day approached from a full tank and a day approached from an empty one is not subtle. I find it wonderful to just sometimes sit, not type, not produce, close my eyes,
Let the thoughts come to me rather than the other way around. The best realizations come from times when I'm not listening to music, just listening to golden silence. That phrase stays with me, golden silence, because silence isn't empty, it's full of everything that couldn't get through the noise. So I want to ask you, when was the last time you gave yourself genuine nothing? Not sleep, not distraction, not a podcast in your ears, just actual unstructured stillness. And what do you think might come up if you did?
I want to talk about silence. Not the absence of sound, exactly. Something more specific than that. There's a quality of quiet that I've started calling golden silence in my own mind. And the reason that word, golden, feels right is because it isn't empty. It has weight and warmth and a particular texture that ordinary quiet doesn't always have. It's the silence that arrives when you've been still long enough that the noise you were carrying inside finally settles, when the mental to-do list stops reciting itself, when the background hum of ambient anxiety goes quiet enough that you can hear something underneath it. Most people never get there, not because they can't, because they don't wait long enough. The first few minutes of genuine stillness are uncomfortable for almost everyone. The mind, accustomed to constant input, doesn't immediately relax when the input stops. It reaches, it fidgets, it generates its own noise to fill the gap. Remembered conversations, half-formed worries, the sudden urgent sense that you should be doing something else. That restlessness is not a signal that silence isn't working. It's the silence beginning to work. What I've noticed is that if I stay with it, if I don't reach for the phone or the music or the podcast to relieve the discomfort, something shifts around the 5 or 10-minute mark. The reaching stops, the fidgeting quiets, and the mind, finding nothing to respond to, starts doing something different. It starts generating. Not in a forced way, not the deliberate effort of trying to think creatively, more like the way a cleared drain allows water to move that was always there but couldn't find its way through. The thoughts that arrive in golden silence are different from the ones I chase during active work. They're less linear, more associative. They connect things that don't obviously belong together and find the relationship between them before I've consciously noticed either one separately. That's where my best ideas come from, not from effort, from stillness that went deep enough to reach the good material. And I've started to understand why most people avoid this. Silence confronts you. When the noise stops, you're left with whatever is actually there, the unprocessed thing, the uncomfortable feeling, the question you've been outrunning with busyness. The podcast in your ears isn't just entertainment. Sometimes it's distance, a way of staying slightly ahead of something you'd rather not sit with. I'm not immune to that. I've used noise exactly that way, but I've learned that the things I was running from in the silence weren't as large as the running made them seem, and sitting with them, actually allowing them to be present without immediately covering them over, turns out to be far less terrible than anticipated. Often it's just a thought that needed to be finished, an emotion that needed to be felt, something small that had been inflated by avoidance into something that felt enormous. Golden silence metabolizes all of that, quietly, without drama. What it leaves behind is space, and in that space, without the noise crowding everything out, the thoughts that matter have room to surface. The connection you didn't know you were looking for, the realization that wasn't ready yesterday but is ready today, the quiet knowing that something in your life needs to change, and this time you're still enough to hear it. The best realizations come from times when I'm not listening to music, just listening to golden silence. I keep returning to that because I keep finding new things inside it. So I want to ask you, what are you filling your silence with?
And is it possible that whatever you've been looking for is already there, waiting for the noise to stop long enough to be heard?